The message arrived on a Tuesday, though. They had no concept of such a day. To them, it was simply the 342nd rotation of the imperial cycle, a day like any other in the endless expansion of their glorious empire. Emperor Asix sat upon his throne of living crystal, its surface warm against his scaled hide. Around him the court bustled with the usual business of conquest. Admirals reported new territories absorbed, governors presented tribute from subjugated world, scientists displayed weapons capable of cracking planets like eggs. The Empire had consumed over 200 species across 3 galactic arms. Some had fought, some had surrendered, all had fallen. This was the natural order of things. The strong devoured the weak and were the strongest beings in existence. So when the diplomatic courier presented the message from something called the Tan Confederacy, the Emperor barely glanced at it. Another species begging for mercy before we arrive, he asked, his voice rumbling through the vast chamber. Not exactly divine one, the courier said. He was trembling, though he could not explain why. Something about the message had unsettled him. They have sent coordinates and a warning. The Emperor took the document. It was remarkably simple, a list of spatial coordinates forming a boundary, and beneath them a single statement written in crude but functional imperial standard. Entry beyond these markers without authorization guarantees death. No exceptions, no negotiations, no survivors. For a moment the throne room fell silent. Then the Emperor began to laugh. It started as a low rumble and built into a roar that shook the crystal pillars. His courtiers joined in, their own laughter echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Who are these humans? As demanded when he could speak again. What do we know of them? The Minister of Intelligence stepped forward. He was an old, his scales gray with age, his eyes sharp with decades of accumulated knowledge. Very little divine one, a young species. They achieved faster than light travel. Perhaps 3 centuries ago. Their territory is small, their population is limited. Our scouts have observed no significant military assets, no dreadnought fleets, no planetary defense systems of note, no weapons of mass destruction. And yet they threaten death to the greatest empire in the galaxy. The Emperor said, he was still smiling. I admire their courage, even if it borders on insanity. Perhaps they do not know who we are, suggested Admiral N, commander of the 3rd Expansion Fleet. Isolated species sometimes develop delusions of importance. Then we should educate them, the Emperor replied. Send scouts, 3 vessels should suffice. Map their territory, assess their resources, and identify the optimal strategy for subjugation. I want them absorbed within the year. Orders went out within the hour. 3 scout ships from the Outer Rim Patrol were redirected toward the coordinates the humans had provided. Their captains were experienced officers, veterans of dozens of successful expansions. They approached the mission with the casual confidence of predators investigating new hunting grounds. The boundary the humans had established was marked by small automated beacons. They floated in the void, broadcasting the same message on all frequencies. You are approaching Tan space. Turn back. Entry guarantees death. Captain of the scout vessel Seeker laughed when she heard it. She had conquered species that fielded fleets of thousands. These humans could Barely a forward warning buoys. Continue. Forward, she ordered, full sensor sweep. I want to know everything about this. Territory before dinner. The three scout ships crossed the boundary in formation. Their sensors immediately began. Everything they could detect, star systems, planetary bodies, resource concentrations, the usual data required for efficient conquest. For 6 hours nothing happened. The ships moved deeper into human territory, finding nothing remarkable. A few colony worlds, some mining operations, scattered stations, nothing that suggested the humans could back up there. Arrogant warning, then the seeker vanished. There was no explosion, no weapons fire, no distress call, snorts. One moment the ship was there, broadcasting routine telemetry. The next moment it simply ceased to exist. The other two captains stared at their sensors in confusion. Seeker report, captain of the Hunter. Transmitted, seeker respond. Silence. Perhaps a drive malfunction, suggested his first officer. Catastrophic containment failure could. The Hunter vanished. Captain S of the remaining vessel, the Stalker, did not wait to analyze the situation. He was a veteran of the suppression where he had learned that sometimes survival meant running first and thinking later. He ordered an immediate retreat at maximum speed. The Stalker made it approximately 30 seconds before it too disappeared from existence. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace that three vessels and their crews had ever existed. Back on Prime, the communications officers waited for the scheduled check-in. It never came. They waited longer than longer still. Finally they reported the silence to their superiors. Equipment failure, the Minister of Intelligence declared. All three vessels must have suffered simultaneous malfunctions. The Outer Rim Patrol has been complaining about maintenance issues for years. The Emperor was less certain. He sat upon his throne and read the human message again. Entry beyond these markers without authorization guarantees death. No exceptions, no negotiations, no survivors. 3 ships is not enough data to draw conclusions. Admiral and argued we should send a proper force, a flotilla, 40 vessels with full military capability. If the humans have some hidden weapon, we will find it and destroy it. The Emperor considered this. Pride demanded response. They did not retreat from primitives who had barely mastered space travel. To do so would show weakness, and weakness invited challenge from the subject species already under imperial control. Very well, he said, send the flotilla, but instruct Admiral to proceed with caution. I want answers, not more mysteries. The orders went out. 40 warships assembled at the border, their crews eager for the easy conquest. Everyone expected. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the carrier Dominion's reach, and watched the human warning beacons drift past his viewport. Guaranteed death, he muttered. We shall see about that. The flotilla crossed into Tan space in perfect formation. Weapons charged, sensors at maximum range. They were prepared for ambush. They were prepared for battle. They were prepared for anything the humans might throw at them. They were not prepared for nothing. For 3 days absolutely nothing happened. The flotilla moved deeper into human territory, finding the same unremarkable colonies and stations the scouts had detected. No warships rose to meet them. No planetary defenses activated. No communications demanded their withdrawal. Admiral began to relax. Perhaps the humans had realized their threat was empty. Perhaps they were hiding, hopping. That would simply go away. Perhaps this would be the easiest conquest in Imperial history. On the fourth day, ships began to disappear. It started with the vessels at the edges of the formation. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. No warnings, no weapons fired, no time to react. The crews simply ceased to exist. Between one sensor sweep and the next, Admiral ordered tight formation. He ordered increased sensor sensitivity. He ordered weapons free on any contact. None of it helped. The ships continued to vanish one by one in perfect silence. By the end of the fourth day, only the Dominion's reach remained. Admiral A stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by empty stations where his crew had once worked. They had been taken to somehow plucked from the ship without a sound. Single transmission reached his console. A human voice, calm and emotionless. You were warned. Then everything went dark. One escape pod was permitted to leave Tan space. It contained Admiral, alive but changed. His eyes stared at nothing. His body trembled without stopping. When the rescue ships found him, he could speak only one word. Everywhere, he whispered. They are everywhere. The medical bay on Prime was the finest in the Empire. Its doctors had healed wounds that would kill lesser species. Its machines could rebuild bodies from almost nothing. Its drugs could calm the most troubled minds. None of it helped Admiral I. He lay on a bed of soft crystal, his scales pale and dry, his eyes fixed on something no one else could see. The doctors had tried everything: chemical treatments, neural stimulation, deep meditation therapy. Nothing reached him. He existed in a world of his own, trapped with whatever he had witnessed in Tan space. Everywhere, he whispered again and again. They are everywhere, in the dark, in the silence, everywhere. Emperor Oz stood at the viewing window, watching his admiral through the transparent barrier. Behind him, the war council waited in tense silence. This was not how conquests were supposed to go. They took what they wanted. They did not lose fleets to species that barely qualified as spacefaring. What did this to him? The Emperor demanded. The chief medical officer stepped forward. She was nervous, her claws clicking against each other in unconscious anxiety. We do not know. Divine One, there is no physical damage, no chemical contamination, no disease or parasite. Whatever broke his mind did so through experience alone. He saw something. The Minister of Intelligence said something that shattered a veteran of 40 campaigns, something that erased 40 warships without leaving a trace. Impossible, Admiral, and insisted. The humans have nothing. Our intelligence confirms this. A handful of colonies, a few patrol vessels. They cannot have defeated the flotilla through military means. Then how do you explain this? The Emperor asked, gesturing at the broken admiral. No one answered. The War Council met for 7 hours. They argued, they theorized. They accused each other of incompetence. They demanded better intelligence. They questioned the loyalty of the scouts and the flotilla crews. Perhaps this was treachery. Perhaps someone had sold secrets to the humans. Perhaps this was all an elaborate deception. By the end, they had reached only one conclusion. They needed more information. We have intercepted communications from human space, the Minister of Intelligence reported. Most of it is encrypted beyond our ability to decode. but we have found some fragments. They speak of something called the Veil. What is the Veil? The Emperor asked. We believe it is their defense system. The fragments suggest it is automated, unmanned, some kind of network that operates without human control. Admiral and seized on this immediately. Machines, he said, they are hiding behind. Machines, this explains everything. Machines can be hacked, they can be overwhelmed with numbers, they can be destroyed through superior force. Superior force failed, someone pointed out 40 ships is not superior force and replied, it is a reconnaissance in strength, a probe. We now know that humans have hidden weapons. Very well. We will send a force that no amount of machines can stop. The Grand Armada 800 capital ships, the full might of the Empire. The room fell silent. The Grand Armada had not been assembled in generations. It was the ultimate expression of power, a fleet capable of conquering entire galactic arms. Using it against a single minor species seemed like overkill of the highest order, but the Emperor was tired of mysteries. He was tired of losing ships to an enemy he could not see. He wanted answers, and if that meant deploying every warship in the Empire, so be it. Assemble the Armada, he commanded. My nephew will lead the fleet. Prince L was young, ambitious, and eager to prove himself. He had spent his entire life in the shadow of his uncle's greatness, waiting for a chance to demonstrate his own worth. This mission was everything he had dreamed of, a chance to crush a defiant species, a chance to solve the mystery that had baffled the Empire's finest minds, a chance to cover himself in glory. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Imperial Vengeance, and watched the Armada assemble around him. 800 capital ships, each one capable of destroying planets, 2 million soldiers, 10,000 fighter craft, enough firepower to end civilizations. The humans will regret their arrogance. He declared to his command staff, we will find their precious veil and tear it apart. We will burn their colonies. We will enslave their population, and we will make an example that the galaxy will remember for 1,000 years. His officers cheered. The fleet moved forward. The journey to Terran space took 12 days. 12 days of anticipation. 12 days of planning. 12 days of imagining the glory that awaited them. Prince L spent the time studying everything the Empire knew about humanity. It was not much. The humans were physical, weak by standards. They required specific atmospheric conditions to survive. They reproduced slowly. They had no natural weapons, and yet they had destroyed 43 ships without a trace. Veil, everything came back to the Veil. What was it? How did it work? How could machines defeat warships without detection? The prince had his theories. Perhaps it was some kind of cloaking technology. Perhaps the humans had found a way to hide vessels in subspace. Perhaps they had stolen ancient weapons from some dead civilization. None of his theories prepared him for the truth. The Armada crossed into Tan space on a bright morning by shipboard time. The human warning beacons repeated their message, but no one was listening. 800 ships moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of steel and fire that nothing could stop. For 2 days nothing happened. The pattern repeated itself. Empty space, silent systems, no sign of human resistance. Prince L began to wonder if the humans had simply fled. Perhaps they had seen the Armada coming and abandoned their territory. Perhaps There would be no glory after all. On the third day, the long-range sensors detected something. Contact, the sensor officer reported. Bearing 774, range unknown. The contact is extremely large, my prince. How large? The officer checked his readings, then checked them again. His face went pale beneath his scales. I cannot determine the boundaries, my prince. It appears to extend beyond our sensor range. El felt the first stirring of unease. Show me. The main display activated. It showed the armada at the center, 800 points of light representing the pride of the Empire. Beyond them at the edge of sensor range was something else, something that showed as a wall of contact stretching in every direction. Full illumination, the prince ordered. Light up the void. I want to see what we are facing. The armada activated every external light it possessed. Search. Lights, flares, emergency beacons. The darkness around them retreated, revealing the truth. They were surrounded. The contacts were not ships. They were something else. Objects of every size, from specks no larger than a fist to masses that dwarfed the largest dreadnought. They hung in the void like stars, billions upon billions of them, stretching beyond the horizon of visible space. What is this? Someone whispered. Prince El stared at the display. He understood now why Admiral could only say one word. The things were everywhere. They filled the space around the armada like water surrounding a drowning man. There was no direction to run, no gap to escape through. They had sailed into an ocean of machines, and the ocean was moving. The first wave struck before anyone could react. Ships at the edge of the formation simply stopped responding. Their lights went out, their engines died. They became dead metal in an instant. All ships, weapons free. El screamed, fire at will. The armada unleashed everything it had: plasma cannons, missile bargages, energy beams. The void lit up with the fury of 800 warships fighting for survival. It made no difference. Machines absorbed the firepower without slowing. They flowed around the attacks like water around stones, and they kept coming. Ship by ship, the armada began to die. The Imperial vengeance shuddered as another ship in the formation went dark. Prince El gripped his command chair, watching the tactical display with growing horror. The neat formation of 800 vessels was dissolving into chaos. Ships blinked out of existence one by one, their icons vanishing from the screen like candles blown out by an invisible wind. Target lock. His weapons officer shouted. I have target lock on one of the machines. Fire. The main cannon discharged, sending a beam of concentrated plasma screaming into the void. It struck one of the larger machines dead center. The impact should have vaporized anything made of matter. The machine absorbed the energy. Its surface rippled like water, dissipating the heat across its structure. Then it continued forward as if nothing had happened. Again, maximum power. 3 shots, 5 shots, 10 shots. Each one hit the same target. Each one was absorbed without visible effect. The machine reached the nearest ship in the formation, a destroyer called the Vengeful Claw, and simply attached itself to the hull. For a moment nothing happened. Then the destroyer began to come apart. It was not an explosion. It was not destruction. It was disassembly. The machine was taking the ship apart piece by piece, separating hull plates from frame members, disconnecting power conduits from reactors, removing weapons From their mounts, the process was precise, methodical, almost gentle. Within minutes, the vengeful claw had ceased to exist as a ship. It was now just a cloud of components drifting in the void. Prince L watched in stunned silence. His crew watched with him. None of them had ever seen anything like this. They destroyed their enemies with fire and fury. They did not take them apart like toys. The crews, someone whispered. What happened to the crews? The answer came from the sensor officer. His voice was barely audible. Life signs detected among the debris. They are alive. The machines removed them from the ships before disassembly. Why? No one had an answer. The killing continued hour after hour, ship after ship. The machines did not attack in waves. They did not employ tactics. They simply flowed forward like a tide, overwhelming everything in their path. Weapons fire meant nothing to them. Shields meant nothing. The most advanced warships in the Empire were helpless as newborns. By the end of the first day, 300 ships were gone. By the end of the second day, 500. The survivors clustered together in a desperate formation, pouring everything they had into the void around them. It was like trying to hold back an ocean with a cup. Prince L tried everything. He ordered ramming attacks. The machine simply moved aside, letting the charging ships pass harmlessly through gaps that appeared and closed in an instant. He ordered coordinated fire, concentrating every weapon on single targets. The machines distributed the energy among themselves, each one absorbing a tiny fraction of the damage. He tried to run. Jump drives activated, ready to tear holes in space and escape to safety. The machine surrounded each ship, attempting to flee, smothering the drive fields before they could form. There was no escape. On the third day, the prince finally attempted surrender. Attention, human forces, he broadcast on all frequencies. This is Prince L of the Empire. We request cessation of hostilities. We are prepared to negotiate. The response came in the same calm, emotionless voice that Admiral had heard. You were warned. Please, the prince said. Pride had died somewhere in the last 72 hours. All that remained was fear. We will withdraw. We will recognize your territory. We will pay any price you demand. You were warned, the voice repeated. No exceptions, no negotiations, no survivors. The machines resumed their advance. By the fourth day, only the Imperial vengeance remained. Prince L sat alone on his bridge. His crew had been taken, pulled through hull breaches that sealed themselves. Immediately afterward, he had watched each one disappear. Their screams cut short as the machines carried them away to unknown fates. He waited for his own end. He had stopped fighting. He had stopped hopping. He simply sat in his chair and watched the machines dismantle his flagship around him. But his end did not come. Instead, the machines stopped. They held position around the drifting remnants of his ship, their surfaces gleaming in the light of distant stars. For a long moment nothing moved. Then something new appeared on his display, a data packet transmitted directly to his console. He opened it with trembling claws. It contained a recording, 72 hours of footage from every angle, showing the complete destruction of the Grand Armada, 800 ships taken apart like children's toys, 2 million soldiers extracted and removed to destinations unknown, the mightiest fleet in galactic history erased without a single human ever appearing on a Message. Prince L of the Empire, you have been selected as a witness. You will return to your people and deliver this recording. You will explain what you have seen. You will ensure that the warning is understood. Why, he asked the empty air. Why are you doing this? Because extinction should be a choice, not a surprise. We are giving you the choice we never got, an escape pod detached from what remained of the Imperial vengeance. The machines guided it gently to the edge of Tan space and released it. Prince L drifted for 6 days. Before a patrol found him, he was alive. He was conscious. He remembered everything. He spent the journey home watching the recording again and again. He watched his fleet die. He watched the machines flow through space like living shadow. He watched 2 million of his people vanish into the darkness, and he began to understand. The humans had not built the veil to fight wars. They had built it to end them. It was not a weapon. It was a statement, a declaration that Terran space was beyond conquest, beyond negotiation, beyond the reach of any empire that might rise against them. They called it the veil, but it was really a shroud for anyone foolish enough to cross the boundary. When El finally reached Prime, he went directly to the Imperial Palace. He walked through the grand halls, past the crystal pillars and the golden tapestries, and knelt before his uncle's throne. I have failed you, Divine One, he said. The Armada is gone. I alone survived. Emperor O stared at his nephew. The young who had left seeking glory had returned as something else. His eyes held the same emptiness as Admiral A's, though he retained his ability to speak. Tell me, the Emperor commanded. So El told him. He described the machines. He described their numbers. He described how they had dismantled 800 warships without losing a single unit. He described the calm voice that repeated the same words like a prayer, and then he played the recording. The War Council watched in silence. The admirals, the ministers, the governors, the most powerful beings in the empire watched their mightiest fleet disappear like smoke in a windstorm. When it was over, no one spoke. The emperor sat on his throne of living crystal, and for the first time in his long reign, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The Imperial Palace had never been so quiet. The usual bustle of courtiers and officials had ceased. The servants moved in silence. Even the great crystal pillars seemed to have dimmed, as if sensing the mood of their masters. Emperor O sat alone in his private chambers, watching the recording for the 100th time. The images had burned themselves into his mind. 800 ships, 2 million soldiers, the pride of the empire, gone in 72 hours without a single human casualty. The machines haunted his dreams. He saw them in the darkness when he closed his eyes. Billions of silent shapes, patient and eternal, waiting in the void between stars. They did not hate the, not fear them. They simply existed, doing what they had been built to do. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Minister of Intelligence entered, his old scales gray with exhaustion. Divine One, I have completed my analysis of the recording, and I have gathered additional intelligence through sources I would rather not name. Tell me everything. The minister took a deep breath. The humans call it the veil, but that is a simplification. It is actually a network of autonomous weapons, platforms that spans the entirety of Tan space. Our best estimates suggest there are between 10 billion and 100 billion. Individual units, the emperor's claws, tightened on his chair, 100 billion. Possibly more. The units range in size, from microscopic to objects larger than. Our greatest dreadnoughts, they communicate through methods we do not understand. They coordinate their actions instantaneously across vast distances. They can replicate themselves using raw materials from asteroids and dead worlds, self-replicating weapons. The emperor murmured, the humans have built self-replicating weapons. Yes, Divine One, they began construction approximately 300 years ago, shortly after they achieved faster than light travel. They have not stopped since. Veil grows larger every day. The emperor rose from his chair and walked to the window outside the capital city. Stretched to the horizon, its towers and spires gleaming in the light of the twin suns. Billions have lived their lives below, unaware that their empire had just suffered its greatest defeat in history. Why, he asked, why would anyone build such a thing? The resources required must be astronomical. The effort, the time, the dedication. What drives a species to create an automated death machine that spans their entire territory? The minister hesitated. I believe I have an answer, Divine One, though you may not like it. Speaker, the humans are afraid. The emperor turned to face his minister. Afraid they have a weapon that destroyed our greatest fleet. What could they possibly fear? Everything, Divine One. Their history is a chronicle of violence and near extinction. They have fought wars among themselves that killed hundreds of millions. They have faced natural disasters that nearly wiped out their species. They came close to destroying their own through environmental damage and nuclear weapons. This is common among primitive species. The emperor said, many civilizations have violent origins. Yes, but the humans never stopped being violent. They never stopped being afraid. When they reached the stars, they did not find peace. They found a universe full of species like us. Predators, conquerors, empires that would devour them without a second thought. The minister pulled up more data on his tablet. The humans knew they could not match such empires in conventional warfare. They lacked the population. They lacked the resources. They lacked the time, so they chose a different path. They decided to make their territory so dangerous, so absolutely lethal that no one would ever attempt to take it. The veil. Yes, Divine One, the veil is not a weapon of conquest. It is a weapon of absolute defense. The humans do not want to rule the galaxy. They do not want to expand their territory. They simply want to survive, and they have decided that the best way to ensure survival is to make the cost of attacking them utterly unacceptable. The emperor considered this. He had conquered many species in his reign. He had faced defiance, resistance, and occasional cleverness, but he had never faced a species that had turned its own paranoia into an impenetrable fortress. The recording mentioned that the soldiers were taken alive, he said. What happened to them? We do not know for certain. However, intercepted communications suggest they have been placed in a kind of suspended animation. The humans are storing them. Storing them for what purpose? Again, we can only speculate, but the human message mentioned giving us a choice. Perhaps they intend to return our people. If we accept their terms, the emperor's eyes narrowed. What terms? They have made no demands. They have made one Demand, Divine One, they have demanded that we respect their boundary, nothing more, nothing less. They do not want our territory, they do not want tribute. They do not want submission, they simply want to be left alone. It was such a simple request, such a reasonable demand, and yet it represented the greatest challenge the empire had ever faced. An empire that could not expand was an empire in decline. They had built their entire civilization on the principle of growth. New territories meant new resources. New resources meant more power. More power meant more conquest. It was an endless cycle that had driven them forward, but the humans had broken the cycle. They had placed a wall in the path of expansion that could not be overcome, not through force, not through numbers, not through any weapon. The possessed, there is something else. Divine One, the minister said. The recording included an invitation. What kind of invitation? A meeting. The humans wish to discuss terms for what they call continued existence. They have a neutral location. They guarantee safe passage. The emperor laughed bitterly. They guarantee safe passage. The species that just destroyed our greatest fleet guarantees our safety. How generous. It may be a trap, Divine One, but consider the alternative. If we refuse, what then? Do we send another fleet? Do we watch more of our ships disappear into the void? Do we spend generations building weapons that may or may not work against their machines? Or do we accept that we have been defeated? The emperor finished. Defeat is a strong word, Divine One. The humans have not invaded our territory. They have not demanded our surrender. They have simply demonstrated that their space is beyond our reach. Perhaps there is a path forward that does not involve conquest. The emperor stood in silence for a long time. Outside, the suns continued their slow journey across the sky. The city continued its daily rhythms. Life went on as it always did, but everything had changed. Arrange the meeting. The emperor finally said, I will attend personally. The minister bowed. Are you certain? Divine One, if something goes wrong, if something goes wrong, then the empire will have a new emperor, but I do not think the humans intend to harm me. They want witnesses. They want their message to be understood. They want the galaxy to know what happens to those who ignore their warning. He turned back to the window, his reflection staring back at him from the crystal surface. I have spent my entire reign taking what I wanted, he said quietly. Perhaps it is time to learn what cannot be taken. The invitation was accepted. The meeting was arranged. And the emperor of the prepared to face the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not with weapons, not with threats, but with words. It would be the hardest thing he had ever done. The neutral station hung in the emptiness between stars, far from any inhabited system. It was a simple structure built specifically for this meeting, designed to make neither side uncomfortable. Shuttle approached from one direction. The human vessel approached from another. Emperor O watched through the viewport as the station grew larger. His honor guard had wanted to accompany him, but he had refused. The humans had a small delegation, 3 representatives from each side. He would bring his nephew L, who had survived the veil, and his minister of intelligence. No soldiers, no weapons, no displays of power. What was the point of displaying power to beings who had already demonstrated that your power meant nothing? The shuttle docked. The emperor rose from his seat, straightening his ceremonial robes. They felt foolish now. Gold and jewels and symbols of authority. What did such things mean to a species that had built death into the fabric of space itself? The airlock opened. He stepped through. The meeting room was simple, a table with 6 chairs, soft lighting, neutral colors. No decorations, no symbols, nothing to suggest the importance of what was about to happen. 3 humans were already seated on the far side of the table. The Emperor studied them as he approached. They were smaller than he had expected. Softer looking, no scales, no claws, no natural weapons of any kind. Their skin was thin enough that he could see blood vessels beneath the surface. These fragile creatures had destroyed his armada. Emperor O, one of the humans said, rising from her seat. She was middle-aged by human standards, with gray in her hair and lines on her face. Thank you for accepting our invitation. I am Ambassador. These are my colleagues, Director and General Santos. The Emperor nodded. I bring my nephew, Prince L, and my Minister of Intelligence. Please sit. They sat. For a moment no one spoke. The 2 species studied each other across the table, trying to understand what they were facing. Ambassador broke the silence. You're wondering why we did what we did, why we built the Veil, why we destroyed your fleet instead of simply turning them back. The thought had occurred to me. The Emperor said, then let me explain. The Ambassador folded her hands on the table. Humanity has existed for approximately 300,000 years. For most of that time, we lived on a single planet, fighting among ourselves for resources and survival. We nearly went extinct at least 3 times that we know of. Disease, ice ages, our own weapons. Many species have similar histories. Yes, but we never forgot ours. When we finally reached the stars, we carried all that fear with us. We expected the universe to be like Earth, only larger. A place of competition and predation and death, and we were right. Director leaned forward. He was older than the Ambassador, with a face that looked like it had seen too much. We encountered 17 intelligent species in our first century of space exploration. 12 of them tried to destroy us. 2 succeeded in eliminating several of our colonies. Before we could respond, we lost millions of people, entire generations. You survived, the Emperor said. You must have fought back. We did. We won eventually, but the victories were close, too close. We realized that we could not keep fighting defensive wars forever. Sooner or later we would face an enemy too strong to defeat, an empire like yours with hundreds of subject species and thousands of warships. General Santos spoke for the first time. He was a small man with cold eyes. So we made a decision. We would never fight another defensive war. We would make our space so dangerous that no one would ever attack us in the first place. Veil, the Emperor said. The Veil took 300 years to build, 300 years of every resource we could spare going into automated weapons platforms, self-replicating, self-improving, designed to destroy anything that enters our territory. Without permission, no exceptions. No negotiations, the Emperor quoted. No survivors. No survivors who cross the boundary. The Ambassador corrected. We always leave witnesses. We need the galaxy to know what happens to those who ignore our warning. Fear is our defense, Emperor. Fear and the certainty that the warning is real. The emperor considered this. He had ruled through fear himself. He understood its power. But there was something else in the human approach that troubled him. You built a weapon you cannot control, he said. The veil operates without human oversight. What happens if it makes a mistake? What happens if it decides that humans are also a threat? The ambassador smiled. It was a sad smile full of old pain. You're right that we can't control it. Not anymore. The veil has evolved beyond our ability to modify or deactivate. It follows the rules we gave it at the beginning. Protect human space. Destroy intruders. Leave witnesses. And if those rules lead it to destroy you, they won't. The veil recognizes human life as something to protect. That programming is fundamental to its existence. But you've identified our greatest fear, Emperor. Not that the veil will turn against us, but that we've created something eternal, something that will continue to protect human space long after humanity itself is gone. The emperor sat back in his chair. He had thought he understood power. He had thought he understood strength, but the humans had done something he could never have imagined. They had made themselves immortal through fear. Even if every human died tomorrow, the veil would continue. It would protect empty worlds against invaders who would never come. It would wait in the darkness forever, patient and deadly. What do you want from us? He finally asked. You said this meeting was to discuss terms for our continued existence. We want you to understand. The ambassador said, that's all. We don't want your territory. We don't want tribute or submission. We don't even want revenge for the ships you sent against us. We just want you to understand that our warning is real and to spread that understanding to others. And our soldiers, the 2 million you took, they're safe, suspended in a kind of sleep. We'll return them once we're satisfied that the lesson has been learned. They'll need time to recover, but they'll be whole. The emperor looked at his nephew. El sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the humans. He had seen what they could do. He had watched their machines take his fleet apart like it was nothing. Now he was seeing something else, something more frightening in its own way. Mercy. The humans could have killed everyone. They could have demanded tribute or territory. They could have made the empire grovel at their feet. Instead, they were offering peace, real peace, not the temporary cessation of hostilities that empires usually meant by the word. Why? El asked, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. You have the power to do anything. You could conquer the galaxy. Why do you choose to hide behind a wall of machines? General Santos answered, because we've seen what empire does to the conquerors. Every species that tried to destroy us was driven by the same need to expand, to dominate, to consume, and every one of them was destroyed in turn, either by us or by the next empire that came along. We decided we didn't want that fate. We just want to live. The ambassador said simply, to grow our gardens and raise our children and build our civilization in peace. Is that so hard to understand? The emperor understood. He understood in a way that shook the foundations of everything he had believed about strength and power and glory. The humans were not weak. They were not hiding snorts. They were simply done with the game that species like the played. They had built their wall and stepped outside the arena forever. I will honor your boundary, the emperor said. I will spread the warning to every corner of my Empire, I will ensure that no vessel ever crosses into Terran space again. That's all we ask. The meeting ended. The delegations returned to their ships. The neutral station was abandoned, left to drift in the emptiness between stars. As a monument to the day everything changed, on the journey home, Emperor O gave orders that would reshape his empire. The boundary around Tan space was marked on every chart, in every database, in every navigation system. The marking was simple and absolute. Death no exempts. The warning spread, other species heard the story. Some believed it, some did not. Those who did not believe sent their own ships to test the boundary. Those ships never returned. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell. Species evolved and went extinct. Wars swept across the galaxy like storms, across an ocean, but through it all the boundary around Terran space remained inviolate. No one crossed it, no one dared. Inside that boundary, humanity continued to grow in peace. They built great cities and traveled to distant stars. They raised children who had never known war. They created art and music and literature that celebrated life instead of mourning death. And in the darkness between their worlds, the veil waited, patient, eternal, ready. It had been given one purpose, and it fulfilled that purpose with perfect dedication. Protect, destroy, leave witnesses. The warning was clear, the warning was real, and the warning would last forever. In the end, that was all humanity had ever wanted. Not conquest, not glory, not empire, just a chance to live